Welcome to Cinematic History Studio. Today, we will talk about United States Civil War. Steam-powered locomotives began racing across the landscape, shrinking distances and reshaping the pace of American life. By the 1850s, thousands of miles of trek connected ports, towns, and inland markets, forging a new national economy. Railroads fueled industrial growth, driving demand for steel and coal while carrying goods faster than ever before. Farmers, immigrants, and entrepreneurs boarded trains toward new opportunities, opening the frontier at record speed. The rise of railroads united distant regions, transformed the economy, and set the stage for even greater expansion. In 1848, gold transformed California overnight, drawing fortune seekers from across America and beyond. Gold was first discovered at Sutter's Mill in January 1848, but news spread slowly. The mass migration didn't explode until 1849, when ships, wagons, and caravans flooded into California from the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. With no legal structure, crime and disputes surged, pushing Californians to demand a stable, recognized government. In Washington, California's request for free state status triggered a national crisis, threatening the balance between North and South. In 1850, California entered as a free state, reshaping the nation and pushing America closer to the breaking point. After the Mexican-American War, huge new lands left the nation unsure, would the West be free or slave? California applied to enter as a free state in 1850, threatening to upset the equal balance of free and slave states in the Senate. Henry Clay proposed a bold package of measures, hoping to give each side enough to keep the nation together. The deal admitted California as free, allowed the people of Utah and New Mexico to vote on slavery, banned slave auctions in Washington, D.C., and created a harsh new Fugitive Slave Act. The Compromise of 1850 held the Union together, but its contradictions deepened the divide, pushing America closer to civil war. By the 1850s, every debate, every law, deepened the divide between North and South. The 1850 law forced citizens to aid in capturing escaped slaves, igniting outrage in the North and fear in the South. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel awakened millions, turning slavery into a moral battle that could no longer be ignored. The Kansas-Nebraska Act opened new lands to slavery, and Kansas erupted in brutal conflict. By decade's end, compromise seemed impossible, and the United States stood on the edge of war. By 1860, the country was so divided that four parties battled for the presidency, each representing a different America. Abraham Lincoln rose from obscurity, uniting Northern voters who opposed the spread of slavery. The North rallied behind Lincoln, while the South overwhelmingly rejected him, turning the election map into a mirror of sectional division. Lincoln won the presidency with no electoral votes from the South, convincing many Southerners that they had lost their voice in the Union. Within weeks, Southern states began leaving the Union, setting the stage for the greatest conflict in American history. By early 1861, 7 states had left the Union, forming a Confederate government and setting the nation on a path to war. Soon more states joined. Southern states that formed the Confederacy during the Civil War were Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, while Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware were considered border states that remained in the Union, though they gave varying degrees of support. Confederate forces demanded the surrender of Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, a symbol of federal authority deep in the South. On April 12, 1861, cannons opened fire. After 34 hours, the fort fell, and the Civil War began. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers, and more volunteers joined both sides. What began as a crisis had become a defining war. Cheering crowds lined the streets as young soldiers marched off to war, convinced the fighting would be brief and victory inevitable. No one yet imagined the years of bloodshed to come. On July 21, 1861, near Manassas, Virginia, Union and Confederate armies collided at Bull Run, turning hopeful expectations into the brutal reality of war. General Thomas Jackson held his ground, earning the name Stonewall. The Union lines crumbled, turning retreat into chaos as soldiers fled toward Washington. Bull Run shattered confidence, proving the conflict would be longer, bloodier, and far more costly than anyone imagined. As the war dragged on, Union leaders realized brute force wasn't enough. The Confederacy had to be cut off, contained, and weakened. General Winfield Scott proposed a bold plan: blockade southern ports and control the Mississippi River, strangling the Confederacy like a coiled serpent. Union ships formed a massive blockade, choking off cotton exports and cutting the South from vital weapons, goods, and global support. Control of the Mississippi became crucial. If captured, the Confederacy would be cut in two, isolating its armies and resources. The Anaconda Plan promised a slow, relentless victory, a strategy that would reshape the war into a long struggle the South could not sustain. In the Western theater, a little-known general named Ulysses S. Grant began turning Union strategy into decisive action. In early 1862, Grant struck the Tennessee River, capturing Fort Henry, opening the South's defenses to Union gunboats and armies. When Fort Donelson fell soon after, Grant refused compromise, insisting on unconditional surrender, a phrase that electrified the Union. At Shiloh, Confederate forces nearly overwhelmed Grant's army until a furious counterattack turned the tide, proving the war would be long and deadly. Grant's relentless advance positioned the Union for a campaign to seize the Mississippi River, a move that would split the Confederacy and elevate Grant to national prominence. The Civil War introduced a new era of naval warfare where ironclads replaced wooden ships and changed the balance of power. The Union Navy surrounded the Confederacy from the coast to the Gulf, choking trade and cutting vital supplies. Two iron giants met in the waters of Hampton Roads, cannons blazing, armor shattering. For hours they battled to a standstill. No ship sank. No side claimed victory, but wooden navies around the world were made obsolete in a single day. Control of the Mississippi and its tributaries decided armies' movements and supply lines one ship at a time. By 1864, the seas belonged to the Union, tightening the noose around the Confederacy. As casualties mounted, Lincoln began to see the war not just as a battle for unity, but a struggle for human freedom. Frederick Douglass, abolitionists, and enslaved people escaping two Union lines pushed leaders to confront the war's moral core. After the bloody victory at Antietam, Lincoln seized the moment, preparing to redefine the purpose of the war. In 1863, Lincoln declared enslaved people in Confederate states free, transforming the conflict into a fight against slavery. The proclamation reshaped the nation, inspiring hope, anger, and determination on both sides as the Civil War entered a new chapter. In the summer of 1863, Robert E. Lee marched his army into Union territory, hoping for a victory that would break Northern morale. What began as a skirmish in a small Pennsylvania town grew into the largest battle ever fought on American soil. With the line collapsing, Union troops on Little Round Top held their ground, a heroic defense that shaped the battle's fate. 13,000 Confederates marched across open fields toward Union lines. In less than an hour, the assault shattered, ending Lee's hopes of victory. Lee retreated south, never again able to take the offensive. Gettysburg became the turning point, the moment the war's momentum shifted for good. In March 1864, after years of stalled progress, President Lincoln appoints Ulysses S. Grant as General-in-Chief of all Union armies. Grant became General-in-Chief, coordinating distant armies under a single, relentless strategy to break the Confederacy. Grant launched a massive offensive, knowing every step forward, no matter the cost, would grind down Lee's army. Unlike previous commanders, Grant did not withdraw after heavy losses. Instead, he pressed south, keeping constant pressure on Lee. Grant's approach transformed the conflict into a relentless war of attrition, signaling that the end was finally in sight. General William Tecumseh Sherman believed that only way to end war was to break the South's ability and will to fight. In September 1864, Union forces captured Atlanta, a major Confederate rail hub, delivering a crushing blow to the Southern morale. Sherman cut loose from supply lines, marching to the sea and living off the land, destroying anything that supported the Confederate war effort. Forts, railroads, and factories were torn apart as Sherman's troops carved a wide path targeting infrastructure, not civilians. By December, Sherman captured Savannah, offering the city as a Christmas gift and signaling the Confederacy's final collapse. In 1864, despite years of bloodshed and doubt, voters gave Abraham Lincoln a second term, a mandate to continue the war and preserve the Union. Grant's forces closed in on Richmond. Every mile gained squeezed the Confederacy closer to defeat. For months, artillery hammered the city. Supplies vanished. Resistance began to buckle. As Confederate officials fled Richmond, fires erupted, turning their capital into a burning symbol of collapse. Union soldiers marched into Richmond. Crowds watched as the last defensive line of the Confederacy disappeared. By April 1865, the dream of a Confederate nation had shattered. The final chapter of the war was at hand. General Lee's army fled west, hoping to break free and regroup, but the Union closed in from every side. On April 9, 1865, Lee found his army trapped at Appomattox Courthouse, their path blocked and supplies gone. In a small Virginia home, Grant and Lee agreed to meet, not to battle, but to discuss peace. Grant offered remarkable leniency. Confederates could go home, keep their horses, and return to their families. As Lee's soldiers laid down their arms, the most destructive war in American history finally came to an end. In April 1865, victory brought joy to Washington. Flags flew, crowds cheered, and peace seemed finally within reach. Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater, never suspecting danger was only steps away. A famous actor and Confederate sympathizer, Booth slipped into the presidential box and fired a single bullet. John Wilkes Booth fled through the countryside as Union soldiers pursued him across Maryland and Virginia. After 12 days on the run, the man who killed President Lincoln was cornered and shot dead during a standoff. Church bells tolled across America. Lincoln's death turned celebration into sorrow and reshaped the road to Reconstruction.